In this video, I'm now moving on from the onDestroy, doCheck, and the onInit lifecycle events, and now I'm looking into two more lifecycle events called AfterContentInit and AfterContentChecked. Now, along with these two lifecycle hooks that we're going to be looking at, we're going to look at another topic as well, which is basically called content projection. Now, if you come from AngularJS, the original version, so not the 2.0 version, but anything below it, this is also known as transclusion. So, basically what that is content projection is basically when you have a template in your document, and inside of that template you want to contain markup that isn't part of that template. So inside of the template element, you can put your own HTML markup, or you can put other templates in there and all that kind of stuff, and it'll be outputted somewhere within your template. Okay. Now, the best way to show this is with an example. So going back to my original GitHub repository, starting from tutorial 16. So if you're following along, check out tutorial 16. And you'll get a screen like this. So what I'm going to do is I want to add content projection to this little profile screen here. So what this is like a player profile. It has a little header card title thing here. Then it has a detail section. And inside the detail section there's a number of entries, right? We've got a position, we've got a height, and we've got a weight. And then it's got some custom content that's in there, even though it looks the same. Okay? So I'm going to start off doing that, and then once I've got that working, I'm going to show you how these lifecycle hooks fit into it. And to do that, we're going to actually add some editing ability to this section, just to show you how the lifecycle works. Okay, so let's get started with this. And the first thing I'm going to do is, because it's part of the player profile, is I'm going to create a new folder under player profile. So I'm just going to use the editor to do this. I'm going to call it transclusion. The reason why I'm just going to call it transclusion is because other people would know it as that in the original Angular, and it's essentially the same thing. Okay. Now, what I want to do is, under this player profile HTML, is I want to take what's here, and you see these LIs and all this, and I want to abstract away all this markup here. I don't want this stuff to exist, right? Because we know that this is always going to be the same style for each row that we add here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a structure, or component-based structure, that will eventually output all this markup itself. So I'll show you what I mean. So if I come in, and I'm going to leave the markup as it is at the moment, and I'm going to change the markup to look like some form of XML, okay? It's going to look like XML, but you'll see what it does in the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a template called player profile, like so. Now, we already have a player profile element, so this one will be just called player-profile, because the original is called app-player-profile. So we'll leave this as this, right? So this will make up the whole card that's on your screen. And then inside of this, I want to have a heading. So I'm going to create a new template called profile heading. Profile heading. So already you can see how the transclusion fits in. We've got ourselves a component here, and then inside the component we actually have our own markup, alright? Now, we don't normally see this with our templates. Usually we just spit out a template like so, and that's it, right? That's all we put in our HTML code. Well, for this, we're saying I've got a template, but I've also got some information that I want to include inside this template somewhere eventually inside of the markup that's represented by this template. It'll make more sense to you when I get to it. But right now, I just want to mark out what the information is going to look like. So this is what I'm going to do. So in fact, I'm going to put this all on one line. So we know we have a heading, okay? We don't know what's going in there yet. Well, I do know what's going in there, but you guys don't. Then we're going to have a profile details section. So that's that big. So going back to the markup, and it might break now. I haven't saved it yet. So that's this whole section, not including each row, right? This white box here, that's going to be described as this thing here. So now we know that inside the details, we want to have a row for each of these items now. So what I'm going to call them at this stage is I'm going to call it a profile detail entry. And we know for a fact that we have 3 of them, so we're going to do it 3 times. Okay? So we're going to do that, and then that, and then that. Now, let's think about what we're putting inside of these things. So for the first, or the overall profile detail information, player profile, we know we have a heading, which is this bit here, and we know we have a details section, right? So there's no other HTML we want to include inside of the player profile section, right? Inside of the profile heading, well, what have we got? We've got the name of the player, okay? Similar to what we've got down here, this right here, okay? So now I can come in here, I can copy this, and I can paste it up here. Now, I haven't included the H4 because that's what we're going to abstract away from this heading here. So whenever we create the markup for this heading, we're going to include the H4, and we're probably going to include this div class, okay? But I'll get to that in a minute. The profile itself is conditional, as you can see here. So we're going to add this condition here. And instead of including it inside the template markup, we're just going to include it straight into the template. So now this will only render itself if the selected player exists. Okay? So again, I'm not saving the file because I don't want it to break this. Now what have we got next? We've got the heading, we've got the details. Now we have each entry. So each entry is position C, height, whatever, weight, whatever. Okay? And if you look down here, that's what we've got here. You see all this? We're going to now copy this, and because it's probably a little bit more than one line, I'm going to do that, like so. So I hope you guys have followed along so far. But this is what's called content projection, right? Because we are projecting markup that is inside of the template. So eventually this markup is going to be replaced somewhere inside of the markup that represents this template, as you will see shortly. But for now, I'm just going to do this. Okay. Like so. So that's the format that I want to have for this particular profile section. I'm not going to be adding any more changes to this stuff right now. So what do we need to do from here? Well, we need to basically create components for all these elements, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different templates, and they're all basically using transclusion. Every single one is, if you look at it. This one is it's got a profile, right? It's projecting a heading, and it's also projecting a detail section. This heading is projecting some markup. The detail section is projecting a bunch of profile detail entries and nothing else. And each profile detail entry is projecting some markup like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over the transclusion. I'm going to go back over to my console here. I'm just going to do an ls just to make sure I'm in the right directory, which is the app folder, which I am. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create templates for these things. So I want to include them inside the player/player profile/transclusion folder. So to do that, we go ng g component, and we go players/player profile/transclusion. Transclusion. Did I spell that right the first time over here? I did. Cool. Just double checking. And the first one I want to call or create is the player profile element. And I'm going to actually call this file player profile transclusion. Because I just don't want it to get mixed up with the player profile that already exists. There's already a player profile.component file, so I'm just going to call it player profile transclusion in this case. So I'm going to enter on that. And we've got an error. And I think could be because I'm going to slash in the front there. No. Not directory. Just app players, player profile, transfer. Is it players? No. Players. App players. So app players, player profile, player dash profile. Transclusion. They're saying that that doesn't exist. Transclusion. TRANS clusion. Transclusion. Let's say okay. Let's have a look at this. CD players / player profile. I'm guessing you guys watching, it's saying not a directory, but it's right there. Oh, maybe I've created the file transclusion here. That's probably what's happened. It hasn't created a folder. I've created the file transclusion. That's probably what's happened here. It's some folder. Let's do this again. This is the folder one. I think I probably typed the wrong one last time. So I created a file. Yeah, that's better. Now it will work. Okay, so let's go back to the original concept here. So now we should be able to create the component in the right folder. And looks like it did. Just double check that. And it's in fact created a player profile transclusion folder, which is not what I want. I just forgot that that's what happens when you use the. See, sometimes using tools isn't beneficial. Let's select each of these files. Damn you! I have to do this one at a time. And we'll delete that folder. Move to trash, which means because I changed that, I'm going to come down here. And no, wrong one. Where's the module for this? It'll be under the players module. Yeah. So we don't want that last bit. Get this off for the second. We don't need that. Cool. Alright, so now we're back on track again. I just saved, so it's now going to break the thing here. It's not going to work. Oh no, it's still working. It's broken down here. Where's this broken? Module players.module.ts. So it can't find. It's garbage. You can try again. It shouldn't break. Yeah. So now it won't load. Yeah, so this is expected because I haven't created those other templates yet. So now I'm going to go ahead and create ones for the heading, the details, and each detail section. So doing the same thing here, we are going to have to remove all those folders. You guys can do it whatever way you like. I'm going to continue to do it this way. And I want to call it, I'll call it heading. And details. Right. and detail heading, detail entry, like so. Now normally I would put all these in separate locations, and in fact this is the kind of thing you'd put in a shared library if you were going to use it across multiple projects. But for this particular scenario, I'm not going to do that. So now if I come in the transclusion, you can see all these folders. And what I'm also going to do is, just to make these easier to see, I'm going to remove the spec files as well. Move the trash. Oops. Move to trash. I thought you could multi-select these, but it doesn't look like you can. It just tries to open it up in the editor, which is so annoying. If you guys know how to select more than one item here without opening up, I'm gonna have to do a research on that later. Anyway, I will grab this, I will drag this up to transclusion, I will grab this and drag it up to transclusion, and same. And I'll grab all the one, delete the spec file. And the spec files we'll get to at the end of the course because it's to do with testing. Right now you need to know how to write Angular 2 first before you try to test it. So in the real world, you write your test before you do anything else, generally. Delete. And then we go bang, 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 and then we delete this, move the trash, delete, move the trash, and delete, move the trash. So everything's inside the transclusion folder now. And so I just come down to the player module, ensure that all these things have been updated. So get rid of the feature bit in the middle here. So we all know they're inside the transclusion folder. And that's what I'm going to do for now. Save that, and now the thing should load. So now we should get something that loads. And again, maybe not. Cannot find module. Low profile slash low profile heading dot component. Interesting. I don't know why. Sometimes the CLI gets screwed up, so I'll try running it again. Sometimes it's still looking at an older set of files. But when you run ngserve again, it will pick up the new changes. Running all the modules, optimizing, and there we go. So all good now. So now the site should load. I might need to manually reload it right now because it's not linked. In fact, it's still not loading. Why is it not loading? What's the error? What have we got here? If profile heading is an Angular component, then verify that it's part of a module. Have I got the wrong name? So probably what's happened is inside of each of these components, I need to update the selectors. Get rid of the app at the front. Yep, that's the problem. Simple stuff to fix once you know what it is. And the last one, which is the detail one. This is what happens once again when you don't write it yourself and you use tools to do it for you. It may still need another refresh here. Let's refresh it once more. And it's still complaining. What's it complaining about this time? Profile heading. If profile heading is legally specified as part of a module. Once again, I think this CLI is playing up. So let's try it once more. Because when you change the selector inside the component, it should now work. Unless I wrote it wrong inside of the player profile. Oh, wait a minute. I've got player profile in front of this. It should be just profile details, like so. Profile detail entry, like so. That's a CSS file. Component. Player profile transclusion, I think is correct. Just come into the heading. Profile heading, and just check one more time what we named everything. So player profile heading. So player profile needs to be updated. Profile heading. So let's go into the transclusion here. You get rid of the transclusion at the end here, and save. And hopefully we're getting closer to having the right answer. And it looks like we have. We click on something. And we get this player profile transclusion works part. Okay. And then we still get this little screen here. Alright. So if I go into here, we've got this, but the reason why the other bit's still popping up is because of inside here we still have this markup here. If I now remove this markup, we're just going to get a player transclusion thing works. So click on something. That's all it's going to say at this point. Now we've done all this work to set up all the templates for this so that they now load and we don't get any errors, right? But we're not seeing all this stuff that we have inside the projection. Now why is that, right? And the answer is pretty simple. You've got to use an element inside of the template called ng-content. This is an element that says whatever placeholder or whatever content that's inside of my element, place the content of that element in this location. So, if I go over to the transclusion component, like so, and instead of having this P thing, if I come in here and I go ng-content, like that, right, and I save, what do you think is going to show up here when I click? Heading works, details works. And you go, okay, how does that work? Well, let's have a look. If we go into if we look at the original player profile content HTML, inside of the player profile, which has that ng-content now, you see a heading and a details template. Okay, so if we go over to the player profile heading component, you'll see that text is there. And if we go into the details one, that text is there, right? But wait a minute, we also have content inside of each of those, don't we? And the answer is yes, we do. So what do? Well, we do exactly the same thing we just did. We go, whoops, we go ng-content, ng-content, okay, save, and then we go over to the details one, and once again, we come in here, and we got ng-content. So now we're rendering the content inside each of the HTML markup, each of the template elements, right? So what do we get now? I click, we get LeBron James, and then we get 3 player profile detail entries. Why do we have this text, and then we have some extra markup here? Well, let's go back, look at the player profile component, and inside a player profile header, we can see now we're accessing the selected player first name and the selected player last name. That's why that's been able to be rendered here. Okay, that is now your heading. However, for profile details, we still have yet another entry, right, or another template that we need to see the content inside of. So what do? Well, it's pretty straightforward. We've done it already. Inside of the markup for the player profile details component. Sorry, not the details component, the detail entry component. Like so. Right. We remove this once again. And we add another ng content because we're looking inside the content of that template. And we save that. And what do we get? So we click on LeBron again. And look at that. We've actually successfully got the content that was inside that whole structure of markup that we created. So now we've done basically, content projection. We've projected all the information that was inside the original component that we had down here. Right, all this is now projecting everything inside of each of the templates, right? But the format's wrong, right? If you look at it, that's not the format we had before. Okay? So what do we do about this? How do we get around this? Well, we need it to be a card, right? And the answer is yeah. So how do we make it a card? Well, it's pretty simple. We just grab the markup that's down here. So, for the player profile, which is the overall card, we need to grab this div, right? This div part, div class card. So we come back to the transclusion component. We come into here, and we set card, right? Like so. Like that, right? So now we look at it, we click on something, and now it starts to look a little bit like a card, right? It's not great, but it looks a little bit like a card. Okay, no big deal there. So what's the next thing we need to do? Well, we need this LeBron James to be the heading, right, and all this stuff to fit underneath it. At the moment, it's all inline, so we need to add the markup for the inline stuff. So once again, we come back over to the component here, and what's in the heading part? Well, we got this div, and we got this h4. So what I'll do for the moment is I'll copy this. I'll go over to the heading component, and where this ng content is, I'll just stick above that this new markup. Now, this stuff is coming from outside. Right, this is the projected content that's in the other file, so we're not going to have that there. And remember what I said, we're going to move the h4. Well, we moved the h4 into the component, and then we're going to project the content that was inside the header. Inside of this h4 tag, like so. So now we'll project a reliable header that's inside of the card block. So we come back. And we pick LeBron again, and it's not quite the same styling, and I'll get to in a minute why the styling's not being applied. But you see now there's a header, okay? No, but we still have this issue of all these individual lines. Well, this is the detail section, right, and the entries. So once again, we go and we look at the original information. So down in the player profile component. For the details section, we need an unordered list. So we'll come up, we go to the details component, we add the unordered list, right? And before we go back, I'm just going to go and update the details entry one as well. So we've got that. Come back down and play the profile component. Now we're going to grab the list item, okay? And we're going to come into the individual detail entry, and we'll dump here the li, like so, and then in where this information is, we're going to project out what is passed in, and save. Okay, so now it should look somewhat like what we had before when we click on something, and you see it kind of does. Right, we've got the header, and then we've got each row with its own information in it. Now, what you notice is that some of the styling's gone away. Like, it used to be black and it used to be centered and all that kind of stuff. You're like, oh, that's not great. You know, it used to look pretty good, right? Like, well, sort of. You know, how do we get it back? Well, you got to think about what we just did, right? We originally had one component with CSS, right? We had one component that contained some CSS that took care of the overall look of things, but now we've broken it down into many components inside of the one major component. So we want the card styling that we had, so which was we want it centered, and we wanted a width to be about 30%, right? We actually do have this already, this styling. It's inside the original player profile CSS. So we just cut this out, right? We cut this out, and we know we have to go up to the transclusion component, and we just paste it here instead. Save, and hopefully it should be centered. So click on the bron now, you'll see now it's centered, okay? But we still don't have this black with the white background, right? Well, if we looked at the previous thing once again, which was the player profile component, we had this profile heading, right? Background, that color, white, whatever, right? Easy. Just remove that out. Go to the profile heading component and paste and save. Right. We click on the bron and everything is back as it was. Right. Looks exactly the same as it did. Now, this isn't the end of the video, obviously. This is just talking about content projection at this stage. But the reason why I want to make this video is we're talking about lifecycle hooks. So, that's where I'm going to get to in this particular video from here onwards. The two lifecycle hooks we're going to be looking at going forward here is we're going to look at AfterContentInit and AfterContentChecked. Okay, and we're going to see how this applies to content projection, and we're going to look at this concept of content items. Right. So, what is a content item? Well, if we go back to the original component that we're looking at here, so the player profile component.html, and now we can remove this. Each of these is a content item. This is a content item of this template, right? Because it is a particular template. This is a content item of this template because it's contained inside of it as part of a projection, right? This is also another content item of this particular template. And then these individual entries are content items or children to do with the profile detail section. So let's see how that works in terms of how we order or how we can get this information, as well as how the lifecycle hooks with these different content items in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my transclusion component. So let's do that. And what I'm going to add, instead of on init here, which we're going to remove because we don't need it for this example, we're going to add a after content init and an after content checked. And I'll explain the differences between the two of these later. But for now, I just want to get the lifecycle hooked in. So, and you will do this for every single component we just created. Checked. And we remove all this stuff. We don't need it. I hate having a line at the end there. So we go ng after content, whoops, capital C, content init, like so. And another one called ng after content checked. And once again, I need to put a capital C here. Don't know what's going on with my keyboard and the capital C's at the moment. The error goes away. And we're going to do it here is I'm going to go console.log, and then I'm going to go this with this, and I'll just put called like so. So basically we're saying component type, method type, or event type, and then just put the word called at the end. And we'll change this to all the content into that. And we're going to do this. There's a little bit of copy and paste involved here. So I'm just going to go to the other ones as well. So we'll go to the heading next. We'll remove all this. Why will it not accept the C sometimes? And then we'll just grab the political profile heading, put it here, and just change it. Once again, we grab this, we'll go to the details component. And we'll paste it. And before we fix the other stuff, let's just quickly do this. Oh, oops, this one. Whoops, not faster. Now I could pause the video and do this, but once again, I like people to follow along with what I'm doing, just in case they're a little bit lost. And you can watch the video back, obviously, but I like to do things in real time, just so it gives other people a chance to do it as well, if they're following along with the video. And the last one is the detailed entry, to which I will also add in the same stuff. Don't know why that one came out like that, but it's good. And we'll go. Right. Let's do this, and we do check. Right, save, and now if I've done it all right, we should still get this loading. And then I'll explain what's going on. I don't know if that loaded or not. Just refresh. If I click on this now, we're going to get not only this thing is rendered still, but we get all these different kinds of events that are called. Okay, so let's go through these events one at a time. Firstly, I'll explain what the event is. Okay, so we've got this content init and then this content checked. Now, these two event handlers are only in the case of content projection. So if you don't have a template that needs to project anything, these events will never ever fire. It's only when your template projects something out that these events will fire, and it will never ever fire outside of that. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is on initialization of a template and the content inside the template, this will fire only when all the content inside of your particular template has been initialized and checked, and then this will fire. Then after that, you will get this checked version. Okay, so if we look back down here and we come down to, for example, player profile detail, right, which is down here, right, after ContentInit is called, but look what's called before it. All the entries have its initialization done and it's checked, and then the next one has its initialization done and it's checked, and then the next one has its initialization done and it's checked. Okay, now after ContentInit will fire only once when the template's being created. Very simple, very similar to the onInit for a template. You know, it's only ever fired once the content inside of your template has been created. On init is a little different. It's before we look at the content. So at that point, the only thing that's initialized, or the only thing you can get access to, is local variables and input fields. Remember I mentioned that in the previous video, that on init you can only get those things. If you wanted to get access to content, you can't in the on init lifecycle hook. However, in the ng AfterContentInit method or lifecycle hook, you can get access to any child content. You know, anything that you're projecting. You can finally, at that point, get that content. Now, I hope that makes sense, because essentially I'm going to show in a minute how you can actually get access to that content. Because at this stage, I'm just projecting it out of console.log, right? I'm not doing anything major with it. But I'll show you how you can get access to that content in a sec. In the other regards to AfterContentChecked, right, and this is where I'm going to be adding in the edit section here so we can see how it gets fired and doesn't call it init as well. That will fire whenever there's been a change. So it's similar to doCheck, but it fires after any child's doCheck / content checked events have been fired. So on init, it will wait for content to be initialized before it will call it. The content checked will wait for any children's content check to be fired before it calls it. As you can see down here, after AfterContentInit, AfterContentChecked. But you can see the content checks are all fired in here first. But you will see more when I actually make content changes to this input. You'll see how it relates to this. And I think that's all I need to explain at this point without actually making any extra changes. So just to give you an idea, look at it from a high level. First we have the profile details part, right? So we're coming in, we're looking at the template, we're going, okay, inside of this template, what do we have in terms of content? We have a heading and we have a details section. So first it reads the first line, and probably the best way to demonstrate this is to look at the HTML. It looks at the first line and goes, okay, we have a heading. Let's call the initialization and the checked on the heading. Okay, so that's what you've got here, right? We've got player profile heading component, ng AfterContentInit, and then AfterContentChecked. Now the heading itself does not project any other content other than markup. And this is a different kind of projection. We're projecting just markup, not extra content. So that's why you see nothing before it, because we're not actually doing anything with any other components. However, if we look at what it wants to look at next, it goes profile details. Okay, we need to look at that template, see if it has any children or grandchildren, whatever, and then eventually we're going to call its AfterContentInit and AfterContentChecked, right? So if we look down the bottom here, excluding the entries for a minute, we see here profile details component init, then checked, and then finally we get back to the main cards template here, and we can see its content init and its content checked is called. But before we can actually call the internal profile details component init and checked, we realize we've got some entries here that we need to process. So then the profile detail says, well, I can't call my initialization yet until I've checked everything inside of each of these. So that's why you get in the next layer here, after the heading's been done, you get each entry has its init and checked event called for each one. Then it finally calls the init and checked. Then finally it calls the main component init and checked. I hope that makes sense. I maybe go over this a couple of times before you can get a full understanding of how this works. But basically, it's kind of checking all the children, then it comes back up the chain to the parent. You know, it's basically, yeah, that's how it works. So it's like the lower down, that stuff gets checked first, then the biggest or the biggest container gets checked last. Essentially, that's how it is. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was how to get access to these things. You know, so if I want to read what the profile heading has inside of it. For example, from the profile bit, I can do that. So then the way I do that is I have to introduce a ContentChild decorator into the transclusion component. Right, so how do we do this? Well, let's go and have a look at the transclusion component. And what I want to do is I need to include another decorator here, and it's just called ContentChild. Okay, so this means I want to get a child, a singular child, that is inside of my template that happens to be a content item or a piece of content, right? A template, so to speak. So we have a decorator. We go ContentChild, like so, right? And we know the ContentChild is a type of something. In this case, we happen to call it player profile heading component. And if you don't know where that came from, that actually comes from the TS here. So this thing here. Alright, and then I'm just going to call it player profile heading component, like so. And it's a type of player profile heading component. Right? This is how we find a child of this type inside of our immediate template. We're looking for a content item that is this type of component that is going to be named this, and ultimately it's this type of component. Now I don't know why we have to write it twice. I think it's just because we have to declare it as something. I could put this as any, but then I wouldn't be able to use it inside the template anywhere. Alright, so we need to include this, so let's import it. So import, and once again I have things on separate lines, player, heading component, like so, from, and it's in the same directory, and then it's called player profile, and it's the last one here, like so. So now I've got access to this. Now this will be null if I try and use it inside of OnInit or do check or anything that gets fired before ContentInit. In fact, do check is fired before ContentInit, just so you know. So it goes OnInit, do check, then after ContentInit. Okay. So once we get to ContentInit, we can actually do something with this. Right. And what I'm going to do, just to make it easy, I'm not going to go through the whole API of what you can access here. I'm just going to go console. In fact, I should do it under this console.log. I'm just going to go console.log player profile. This player profile. Yep, that. And I'm just going to basically spit it out like that. Or we can just use JSON.stringify, but that might be a little bit too big. But we'll do it anyway and see how we go. Oops. Another bracket, save, and let's have a look at this one more time. So now we should get, after we've, or at the bottom, when we click at the bottom, at the moment it's only showing an empty object. Why is that? Interesting. I'm going to look at that later because I haven't used JSON in my previous GitHub call, but it should at least tell you what type of object it is and that it is actually something. If I click on something, you'll see it's a profile. In fact, look, you can see what's in there. So you can see it's got an ng after content checked to ContentInit. So there's not much else in there at this stage. There's no properties, and that's probably why I was showing an empty object, because this is a function and not a property. Like, I believe that when you use JSON.stringify, it doesn't spit out functions; it only spits out properties. Or does it? I don't know. I can't remember now. So basically, you can see you can access to the ContentChild there. Now we also know that for the detail section, we have more than one detail entry. So how do we access that? Well, it's not much different. than what we've already seen. So if we go up here, instead of content child, we go content children. Okay. Now it is a little bit different in terms of what type of object we're getting here, because we're also getting at this point a query list. The reason why we're getting a query list is because we're getting more than one type, and query list just happens to be what the content is saved into. So we come down here once again, we go at ContentChildren, like so. Again, we specify the type, so this is no different. Player profile, detail, entry component, right? And in fact, by clicking on it, actually imported it straight away, but not in the spot I like. So let's do that. And then we're going to go ContentChildren, we'll just do this. And it's a type of query list of player profile detail entry component. So you have to specify the type, right? And that's it. Now once again, same as before, I can only access this from AfterContentInit or later. You can't access this from on init or do check. So once again, in here, I'll just go console.log this.ContentChildren. Right? And save. Okay. And if I click on LeBron, you'll now see after the profile details component has been initialized, we get a query list of 3 results. We look inside it, you go into results, and we see 3 player profile detail entry components. Okay, inside of them, there's just some methods, so therefore it's an empty object. And that's pretty much what I want to show for the initialization and how to get access to content. The last thing I wanted to show you is how this content checked is applied when you make a change to something, because this is very similar to do check in the sense that it's only applied, or it's only called when the content is changed of something, but it's best to show that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the markup a little bit inside of the main player profile component, and we're going to add just a little bit more stuff than we already have. Okay, so going down to the main player profile HTML, at the moment we've just got a little bit of text. All right, so what I want to add here is I want to add the ability to toggle a read-only and an edit screen inside of each of these entries. Now I could include all that information inside the entry and just pass in this, right? But I just want to do it an easier way, and I'm just going to add the read-only and the edit interface straight into here, just to save a little bit of time. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to leave the type up there on its own, and then because I've got a read-only here, I'm going to put this as a span tag, and I go style.display. So I want access to the display of this is equal to, and then I call a method called getDisplayFlag, which I haven't created yet, and I'm going to pass it in something called editPosition, which I also have not created yet. Okay, and then underneath this, I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to close off the span, like so. And then underneath this, I'm going to add a anchor. I'm going to add a click handler to this anchor. And I go equals show edit position. So this is a function I've also not created yet, like so. And then I'll put the word edit here, like so. So this is a bit of a longer and more handler way of doing it, but for now I'm just going to do it this way because it's easier to teach. Span style dot display equals get display flag edit position. So this is the opposite. So this will be when we show the edit part of the screen, if you guys haven't figured that out yet. And then here we put an input type equals text, and we're going to have an ng model here, ng model, and we're going to equal it to, selected player dot position, and close that, like so. And then we'll put a button here, class equals, we'll go btn dash primary, like so, and btn primary, and then we'll have a click handler, and we'll call it save position, like so, like that, and save, and close button. Right. So let's just quickly see if this loads. Oh, it probably won't load because we don't have the methods yet. So let's go and quickly create those methods before I save this. So player profile component. And what we need, first I'm going to add a semicolon, that should have a semicolon. So the first method we're going to have, or the first thing we're going to add here is we're going to add a thing called edit position, which is a type of boolean, and by default we're going to set the false. Okay, the reason why we're setting it to false is we want to show a read-only screen to start off with. Then we're going to create that get display flag method, where we'll have a display flag. That's a type of boolean, and it's going to return a string. So it's going to return either inline or none in this case. So we go return display flag. Right, so if this is true, then we're going to return inline. Otherwise, we return none. Okay, so that will determine the display of it. Then I'm going to put the show edit position function. Alright, and this doesn't actually have anything, and under this we're going to get this dot edit position equals true because we want to show the edit screen. And then we got save position, right, and we just go, and so this situation we're not saving it anywhere, so I'm just going to set this dot edit position back to false. Edit position. And normally you'd save that to database or something like that, right? If you're doing it normally. So I'll save that, and I'll come back up here, and I'll save this. And hopefully this doesn't break. And it did. Damn it. Ng model, since it isn't a known property of input. Oh, okay. Remember, when you put an input and you use ng model, you've got to specify a name. It's very annoying. You have to do that, but you do. I believe that's the problem that I've got here. Maybe not. Interesting. What have I done wrong here? Just trying to work out what I did wrong. Am I using the wrong? Oh, wait a minute. I believe potentially. Let's go to the players module for a sec. At this point, I'm only using reactive forms module. I actually need the forms module for this. Because if I don't pass in the forms module, I don't get access to the ng model for this. So now I come in here, I'll just go forms module, and this should be okay. So let's just check that out. And now he loads. Okay, so that's all good. So let's just quickly, should quickly check to make sure it loads. It loads. I click edit. It shows an edit screen. Doesn't look great. I'll click save. It goes back to that. If I change it to SG, go save. You see it's SG. It's SG up here. So it's binding all the way through. Now here's the important factor though. All right, I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to reload the page. All right. So at this point, we haven't loaded the content yet. Click it. We already seen all this. You know, we've got init checked, init checked, init checked. Everything is init checked, and then at the end, you know, we've got some after content checks, because now we have basically some binding going on with ng model, right? So there's 3 content checks because we've got ng model in place, and then because of that, the details bit has to have an ng after content checked, and so does the transclusion component. But you'll see, oh no, even the heading itself has an after content checked. That's interesting. Oh, wait a minute, no, because that was checked up here. Okay, my understanding was these are right, but I'm not sure why the heading is having content checked at this stage. Because when I check this, right, in fact, why is it doing it for, oh yeah, all 3, because, no, that shouldn't happen. Interesting. Oh, wait a minute, no it does, that's right, I forgot. It's like do check, sorry. So if there's something that we need to check on one item, it'll go through all the content inside of this entire component, and it'll run the after content checked on everything. It's the same as do check. When you check your one component that's on the page, it'll run do check in everything, right? Every single component that exists on the page, do check will be run. It's the same deal with this here. Except it's restricted to content items. So in this case, it happens to be everything that's inside this component that's content will run the after content checked. That's how it works. So, and I didn't even change anything. But look, once I click it, even then, right, if I do anything, like if I click save, everything is checked. Right? If I click edit, everything is checked again. Right? Because as soon as we change the value of something inside of this component, like even if it's a property and not like anything that's bound to a thing, add to an input, we've just changed the state of the component. It'll run the after content check for everything. This is how it works. Okay. Now I should go ahead and update for the rest of them, but I'm not going to. Basically, I have done that in the GitHub repository. I've updated for all 3. You guys can try that out. Really not that hard. It's just a matter of adding more methods to the main component, and basically just having it an edit and hide bit. But the point of this is that whenever I perform some action that changes the state on a component, which in this case has to be a row component, it applies to all components inside of this template. Okay. And that's it. That's all I wanted to show for this particular video. I think it's been a really long one. In fact, I think it's been nearly an hour for this one. But it's a very important one to understand if you're doing transclusion in Angular 1, because it's a little bit different. Okay, it's similar but not quite the same. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go. In the next video, we're going to look at after view init and after view checked, which once again is very similar to after content init and after content checked, except it applies to all templates, not just ones with content or content projection in it. It's every single template that you create. You can do something, and it allows you to access the actual DOM and the markup that's inside of it. You know, so you might want to apply some changes to it in the last minute once the view's been loaded. You don't see this used very often, but I'll definitely show you how it works anyway. Same as you don't really use this very often either. So You might do it if you're building components for particular, like, components for your applications that might be across multiple projects. You might build Angular components that have transclusion in it, or in this case, I just gotta stop calling it transclusion. It's called content projection. But that's essentially the only time to really do this. Or, anytime you want to share something, you might use content projection. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.